should tell you, I could tell you that one place to go.
I'll show up. I don't mind telling. Oh, sorry. I love it. Yeah, it's good.
Later.
I'll show you.
Okay, your order, please stand.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. Roll call, please.
Sarda. Here. Greenway.
Here.
Mueller.
Here.
Sternquist.
Here.
Crandall.
Here. We have a quorum. Before you have the agenda for tonight's meeting, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as listed. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Sternquist.
Yes.
Greenway.
Yes.
Sarda. Yes. Mueller.
Yes.
Crandall.
Yes. Item 3, conflict disclosure. Does any member have a conflict they wish to disclose, either direct or indirect? Nope. Moving on to public comment. Has anybody signed up for public comment? No, that's a no too. Moving right along, we have our Think 3D update. And we have here tonight, Bonnie Harari. Is Mr. Card here too or not? Get your bike.
Just me.
And you by yourself, so fly solo tonight. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. We're gonna pull up the results, and what I plan to do is take you through this year's survey review results on a 30,000 view, and then we'll get into the comparison between our previous survey and this survey, so you can kind of see the different changes and what has happened a little bit differently. A couple things to point out to you in this one. There will be some sections in this where you'll see a change in percentage, not necessarily percentage points, and some things bucket up because they are weighted. So just to give you some perspective on that. So as we come into this, and I'll give you some context on how we feel about some of these things, and once we get through all of this, I'll give you some anecdotal findings that we have. What we'll start here is that I feel like I have appropriate avenues to express my opinions, and that my perspective is heard and appreciated, and that it matters. The main component is that obviously we want to have as many people as we can, and that usually always percentage. And in this particular instance, we have that. So we want to be on that plus 50 side. When we get into that 60, 65% is what we see is probably what we would consider to be elite. In that area, we are trending in that direction. The 41% is generally going to represent folks who know they can say something, but they don't necessarily have the loop closed. So an important component to think about this is not necessarily that somebody can hear my opinion, but it's also that my opinion is heard, and I might get a follow-up, right? So I know that the loop was closed, okay? Down here at the bottom, you see I feel our daily work environment is engaging and overall positive. We have a high number in that agree section. We want to move that to strongly agree and obviously clear out that neutral piece of it. I feel there is a healthy amount of trust within the organization. This one in particular is one of the more difficult ones to move, but it is more significant to be able to move it. And in this one, we have obviously a very high number in our agree and strongly agree. We want to put a special focus on getting people to be comfortable saying that out loud. If a person is in strongly agree, that means that person is likely to be a promoter, meaning that they'll tell somebody else that they experienced this. In agree, they feel it clearly, usually without question. If they're in that neutral piece of it, they feel it most of the time. It's just there are instances that they don't necessarily always feel that way. So as we carry on into this one in the professional, overall I'm satisfied with the organization as a place to work. As you can see, the vast majority of our folks are in that strongly agree section. Again, that is what we're looking for. 75% in that strong section is what we're looking for. As you look at the overall engagement score as a weighted average, we're at 78% right now, which we'll find out here in a little bit is up. Our target goal would be 80%. 80% will put you in the top of our experience in terms of the clients that we have worked with or contact this would be in the top tier. So above that 85% will probably be considered elites. Just to give you an idea of where you're at in terms of scope. This one right here is especially important in how often do I look for another job. What I want you to understand about this particular question, this question is not necessarily just about you, it's also about the field of work, the industry itself, which sometimes can affect whether or not a person is looking for a different industry to engage into, not necessarily just a different place to work in terms of an alternative there. Even in this case, we have a lot of people who are not. We want to have that over that 50%. We are near there. That sometimes, occasionally, we would like to see that in that 25% range. There's always going to be a certain percent of person that's always looking for something else to do, but we want to be in that 25% range for you. These are the goals that we're looking for. These are all trending very well, as you'll find out here in just a moment.
So can I just, on the first two questions, that's the most recent survey that has
Correct.
just completed.
Everything you'll see here is the most recent.
Okay, and then just a comment in regards to the last screen. Actually, I think it's healthy that many people are looking at other jobs. It's a great way to do a comparison to let them know probably just how beneficial it is with some of their benefits here and things, so it's a nice way to actually do that comparison. And
Yeah.
look at it on a positive side that way.
Well, and to that point, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to leave you, per se.
Right.
What it more speaks to for the people who are seldom never, what that more speaks to is the mentality, the mindset, meaning the person is saying that I have work to do here, and I'm going to stay here to do that work. That's more what we're leaning into versus avoiding people leaving. We want more so to affect the mindset where people are saying, I have runway here, and I'm going to do work here. That's really what we're aiming at getting at. But to your point, yes, people being able to look to see, and I'll tell you, and I often bring this up with people, because one of the biggest misconceptions about us is that we work with people that have bad cultures. That's a great misconception, because people with bad cultures don't call us. Because people with bad cultures don't care. So anybody that's actively working towards a thing is big thing. So anybody who goes out in the world and looks at anything comparable, they will see that this is not the norm. That this is a unique circumstance. That people are putting this much work, energy, effort, and investment into bettering the culture. So to your point, that's not necessarily a bad thing at all.
I'm gonna ask a technical question, because maybe we'll get an answer because you might not know. But what's our usual attrition rate among certified staff every year, would you say? They'd probably a guess here.
Are you talking about retirements or?
I guess this would refer to staff not leaving for other reasons, not retirement.
I don't know.
That's probably a tough question.
Yeah,
I'm
wouldn't
sorry,
know.
I'm gonna put it on the spot.
No, that's fine. I'm not sure how I don't know that we gauge that, like, I'm not sure how we do that. And I think really in the last 3 or 4 years, it's been quite a change for all professions and across the board, so it's a hard one to answer. But prior to that, pre-COVID, I would say most of the people that left were due to retirement. I think that's a fair statement.
I'll just color that with just a little bit. One of the things that I would just tell you all when you're thinking about recruitment and retention is a lot of times people just think about that from a numerical standpoint. I would ask you to pair that with the anecdotal context. A lot of time when people think about people leaving, they don't think about addition by subtraction. And a lot of times people don't think about negative retention. So in both of those instances, sometimes we have people who are around longer than they should be. And then there's instances where there's some people who move on before we want to. The other component that sometimes we want to think, double down on retention versus recruitment. Because recruitment happens by way of retention. Because you can't hire who you want if you're busy hiring who you need. And so making sure that the right mix of people are staying longer and that we're moving folks on that do not choose to participate, not that they can't, that they won't, earlier in the process, so that runway is for people who really want to engage. Just something for you to think about as you approach the idea of recruitment and retention. It's a bit of a philosophy. Okay? So to continue in this, I feel recognized and worthy in what I do on a regular basis. These numbers are typically high for these types of industry. What I would tell you is what this tends to mean is whether or not that person is recognized in their love language. So the people who are usually, meaning that those people are recognized in ways that they recognize as recognition. You get what I'm saying? So there's some people you can say thank you to, doesn't mean much to them because it wasn't specific. There's some people you can say good job, it doesn't mean much because you're the direct supervisor, you're supposed to say that. So these are certain things where those people are going to be more inclined to have the recognition in something they recognize as recognition, their love language, so to speak. When you find that occasionally, that's going to speak to folks who get recognition usually in general, maybe as a group, but it doesn't always land in what they would perceive to be recognition for them specifically. This one is a little bit harder to get to because this is more localized, meaning that the immediate supervisor and the person's colleagues have to be participants in getting recognition. For instance, you might have someone that had a peer say, hey, good job. Them getting a good job from you all would mean something different. For some people that would land differently, that would be more significant. So something to think about is that every level, are there different ways that we're recognizing individual and groups because different things are going to hit different people different ways. So this one is a little bit of whack-a-mole. It's a little bit harder to hit, but this is where you got to be creative. And one of the things that I just always remind people is that you never run out of thank yous or pats on the backs or good jobs, so give them out liberally. So something to think about there. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, where do you feel your current level of potential is being utilized and activated in your daily work? Average answer is 7.29, very good number. 8 would be excellent. That's where we're trying to get to. We want to get 8 to excellent. So 8 out of 10 folks feeling like they truly are having their skill used. This communicates engagement. This is one of the direct things that would lead to retention. It can be challenging if that person is appropriately skilled to meet the challenge. Yes, sir.
Are these all this three, for example, the never, occasionally, or usually, the respondents had 3 choices, or they have a scale to go on?
So in this particular instance, they had 3 choices. There are some questions where you're going to see 5, and that is changed from the initial survey. That is just to get a little bit more detailed in some of those areas. So you'll see that change here a little bit later. But in this particular instance, if you only see 3, they only had 3 choices. Okay. I feel encouraged and inspired to give my best at work on a regular basis. 69% is very high. So that is awesome. That is awesome. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. That's just what we're looking for. When you're in that 70+% in that piece of it, that is one of the intangible things that is the hardest to get to. And notice when we say I feel, when we're using things like I feel, those are especially difficult targets to hit. But when a person feels encouraged and inspired, that's a bigger question. And that one honestly probably speaks to the community to some degree. So I would be proud of that one for sure. I feel optimistic about my future with the company. These numbers are looking pretty good as well. We would definitely like to see that usually always over 60, but that's fairly consistent in that particular space. I feel confident. I have the tools and resources and support I need to maximize my potential at work. This is a high number. It's probably skews a little bit higher in these types of fields where there's so much of your resources that are outside of anyone's direct control. So when somebody can't just say, hey, buy that or do that or whatever, this number tends to be a little bit lower just because there's more things from a resource perspective, a tool perspective that are out of a person's individual control or localized control. So this is going to skew a little bit higher. So that 52 would represent more like a 60, 65% for a traditional organization where somebody can just make a decision to get them whatever they want. Okay, I would recommend the company to family or friends as a good place to work. So, falls into that idea of net promoter. So generally, in a net promoter situation, we would combine the top two buckets, agree and strongly agree. We would toss out the middle bucket, and then we would subtract the bottom two buckets, and that's where you would tend to get your net promoter score, okay? We broke it down here just so you can get a little bit more of an idea of, we want you to see the on the fence people, because that's where our greatest opportunity is, right? Obviously, in the lower two parts, there's not a huge bucket there. There are some people to change, but honestly, when you get less than 10%, those are gonna fall into people who are gonna naturally attrition. Those are gonna be, it's not that they're just discontents, but those are gonna be people who are just, there's always a percentage that's gonna skew there. Where we really wanna put the focus is on that 24%. Those are folks that are on the fence. Those are the folks that we can recruit to really beef up that additional number. This is especially important because this affects our perception in the community. This affects our perception in terms of people who might be looking at this district as a potential landing place. So we really want to focus on that. And this is where we can just be more full-throated, more excited. We can be more clear about how good this place is. In our Midwestern way, sometimes we tend to downplay how well we do. We tend to downplay how excellent we are. We tend to downplay how much we've accomplished. This is where I would tell you to fight those tendencies and really dive into telling people just how excellent of a job we're doing. I would encourage you to think about that piece of it. I feel connected to others at work. This is especially high as well. This is a very important one. So connection at work is a direct driver to retention. If a person doesn't have significant personal connections, some might call it a work's best friend, then that person is more liable to leave the organization. So this is one that's really important right here. Being over 60 is excellent. 70 or 70 plus will put us in that elite category. That's where we want to be. I feel there are those within leadership who care about me as a person. These are pretty solid numbers. We would like to see that plus 60, which is where we're headed on that particular one. That's a big one. This one is a little bit more challenging because generally when people are responding to this, they're not talking about their direct leader. They're talking about leadership at a higher level, and this is where it becomes more difficult, which is praise and engagement to a 2 down or a 3 down, which is a little bit more rare. We tend to obviously talk to our direct reports most often. This is where we reach down a little bit further and we talk to somebody that wouldn't expect to hear from us. That's usually what people are talking about in that particular piece. I feel the company cares about my personal success along with the success of the company. These are pretty standard right here. Again, we want this to be in that 50 to 55%.
Bonnie?
Yes.
I have a question. Can you
Absolutely.
answer that for a minute?
Sure.
So, just a curious question, if the top referred rather than to the company and it really highlighted our profession,
Yeah.
how do you think that would change that, or do you think it would?
No, it definitely helps.
Versus the profession?
For sure. That definitely helps. What I would tell you is just, that's just hard to separate at this particular point in time. You know, it's just hard to take out the national sentiment of how people feel, or even the state sentiment of how people feel the profession is being treated, looked at, cared for. It's very difficult to parse that out. What I would tell you is that's what I mean, where you can help that a long ways by talking about what we do. What we do in the context of what we're trying to do, what we create. This is where I think it's fruitful to think of yourselves as a model community. We are doing things that maybe no one else is doing. And we are pursuing a way to educate that is bespoke, that is custom, that is not meant to be like everything else in the world. It is meant to work for this community. That helps because that allows people to more focus on their situation versus the situation. Otherwise, you're going to be answering for things. We're always paying for someone else's tab, right? And so right now, there's a certain way a person is going to feel as a teacher, period. You know, so those things help you narrow it so that they're thinking about their unique experience in this particular district. That's helpful. just about done with this. These are some questions here, and as you'll see here in just a second, we did pretty solid here. So you'll see the summarizations. I won't read them all to you, but we summarize it in culture in general. We're at 6.43. We're looking to be at 7 on that one. Well, let me save you some suspense. We want to be higher in everything, but 7 is a legit marker of the pursuit of excellence. Right now, these right here are in pretty good to really good. Our goal is to get obviously excellent. That's where we're trying to be in these situations, and 7 would represent that in culture, right? We want to be away from that middle. Most people, when they're doing any type of scale, are not going to give you the top of that scale because it communicates that you're off the hook and there's nothing more for you to do. So normally when you're doing a scale of 1 to 10 in these particular instances, you're topping out at a 9. And so when we're really talking about a 7, what we're really talking about is being in that place where people perceive it's about as good as you would expect it to be. So that 7, 7.5 is where we would communicate that particular piece of it. Positive attitudes. That one is and again, this will give more context here in just a second when I tell you the difference between what it was and what it is now. You'll kind of see the difference in some of these things. The one that I would really have you focus on, well, let me say this quick. Communication, that's abnormally high in the sense, communication, you expect to see 5.5 to 6. I don't care what industry, what organization, what the situation is, communication will always be in the top 3 of challenges of that organization. Communication is a notoriously difficult target to hit because so many people want to be communicated to in different volumes, in different ways, to different degrees, and it's very, very hard to do that. So that particular score is trending higher than we would have expected. Communication, that's tough. That's tough. So 7 in that one is very, very rare for an organization like this with this size of group. Coaching is really coaching relationships are 2 of the things that we really want to hyper focus on because again, those speak to retention, job satisfaction, and it also speaks to how people are being onboarded. Coaching, that is trending higher than typical. Most people don't even receive consistent, thoughtful, considerate coaching. So this is one that's trending higher than what we would see in most organizations. Relationship, that is also trending higher than what we would see in most organizations as well. If you compare that to the question we asked earlier in terms of kind of that work best friend, people are feeling some level of connection, and to some degree they're feeling like someone is playing a part in their growth and development. Those are 2 very, very, very strong categories. Just a couple things here. This is where we kind of extract some of the narrative components and we pull out some of the major themes. So these are the top 3 themes that everyone said in terms of the things that they like most about the job. Oftentimes we don't ask people that. When we ask people questions in the survey, it's kind of to figure out what they don't like. And a lot of times we don't necessarily nail down what it is that they do like. And so for most people, as you would expect in some instances, it'd be students. You don't necessarily always see coworkers as second. That speaks again to connection and relationship, which is vitally important for a person's quality of life. It is vitally important for that person's quality of experience in their workplace. And then of course, impact. What this also communicates is these are the things that you want to speak to when you are internally communicating. You will want to remind people often and vigorously about what we do with the students, the type of coworkers that we have, and the impact that we're making. That is what matters to them. That is what they want to hear. That is what we want to make sure we communicate ad nauseum. Over and over and over and over and over and over again. It feels like you're saying it too much, you're only saying it half enough. More and more and more and more and more. Students, coworkers, impact. Yes, sir.
I have a problem understanding the second sentence, or 2 sentences. On the second sentence of the second one, there's a very good balance of venting, quick, and positivity. Venting, quick, and positivity.
Yes. So
tell me what that means.
So the idea of venting quick, meaning someone is coming in and they're quickly releasing it. To give you an example, what we talk about for most folks is the difference between, number 1, venting and spewing, right? So when we vent, we are releasing pressure. That steam goes into the air, it dissipates, leaving the thing that was vented under less pressure and in a more stable state. Venting is healthy. Spewing is not. Spewing goes out on people, it's sticky, it doesn't relieve said pressure, that person's gonna be back in 2 days frustrated again because they're no more stable than what they were a little while ago. So being able to vent quickly, somebody can come in and say, hey, I just gotta get this off my chest, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, they vent and then they get back to what they're doing. Versus a prolonged complaining session where people are spewing. So venting quick. And then a balance of positivity. So you're venting, but you're also saying, but you know what, we're having a good day, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so between those two things, between relieving pressure and perspective, we leave a person in a much more stable state, where they're able to go what they're doing, and that speaks to a person's ability to not just leave it at the door, because that's not really what we're talking about, that's not really a thing, but for that person to go home with the type of attitude and energy that will allow home to send that person back with better attitude and energy.
So is venting part of the Think 3D vocabulary?
Yes, with that definition. So a lot of times people don't qualify it. We want to make sure that we qualify it. Venting is a useful tool if it is relieving pressure, if it is dissipating, and if it's leaving you in a more stable state. If it's not doing those things, that's not what you're doing.
Thank you.
So, to be clear, thank you. Any other questions about any of this? Awesome. Okay. And then these are some of the things that are challenging for folks. So as you can imagine, communication right at the top. That's kind of what happens there. Reevaluating roles and responsibilities. These are oftentimes common themes where people are looking for a little bit of clarity of role. That can usually mean two things, meaning that they feel like they have more of usually someone else's role or responsibilities than they might want, is a lot of times what this speaks to, where people want a little bit of clarity in terms of what my job is. Better listening and feedback check. So if you recall me mentioning earlier, communication really happens when we close the loop, meaning a person might have said a thing, but if they don't feel like somebody closed the loop and gave them that feedback, like for instance, I can give you an idea, but if nobody comes back to me and tells me whether we're doing that idea or not or why, I don't feel like I was communicated to. One of the biggest things on that, excuse me, is that in many organizations, one of the things that's most challenging for people is telling people no. They punt. Hey, we'll get back to you on that. We'll take a look at that. We'll send you an email, nobody. Oh, listen. And that makes people frustrated because it just carries it out. Well, sometimes it's actually better to say no. Because then even though I'm not happy about you saying no, I get to put it down. I get to say this is outside of our priority, or this is not something that we're gonna look at for 18 months. Guess what I'm not gonna do for 18 months? Complain about that thing. Because I know where I'm at with it. So this is where we wanna be clear with our feedback channels, letting people know, asked and answered, you were heard, this is the situation, yes, no, these are the circumstances under which we would do this or not do this. More positivity. What I love about this one is that this seems like this is a challenge. This one right here is really positive for us because anytime people are asking for more positivity, that's positive. And especially because they're also talking about their peers. They want more positivity in their environment and they're asking for it. It's a desire. It's something that people want. That is a very, very good sign. Better relationships. Now, keep in mind, some of these things are in your strengths. We said the relationships are skewing higher than it would be in most places under these set of circumstances, and people want better relationships yet still. Yes, sir.
I see a couple places where it says that teachers are getting more things on their plates.
Yeah.
Maybe they take it off. That's mentioned twice on there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, do we know administratively what they're talking about? And that's a rhetorical question. That's not a question I expect you to answer now, but do we know what they're talking about? And if so, if that's a common attitude amongst teachers, and I've heard it in the community as well, maybe it's something we could address. Maybe that could help us get better scores on our overall attitudes and so forth.
100%. That's definitely something you want to look at. And what I will point out to you is that could be for one or two reasons, right? One of the reasons is sometimes we haven't updated the job, right? Sometimes we have the job description is too narrow of a scope. You know, sometimes people think that all they're responsible for is just what's happening in their classroom and not necessarily the global attitude or environment. And then sometimes people are having things slide on their plate and they're not having someone prioritize things for them. No one ever gets the work done. Anybody in here who's had a job for any period of time, can you think of a time when you had all of your work done and there was no more work to do and you still had a job? No. You never run out of work. But so when people say that, what they're really asking for is does it make sense to them in terms of their role for me to be doing this responsibility? And are you helping me prioritize? I know I'm not going to get through all of the work, but I'm responsible for all of it. Help me prioritize it. You're letting me know you want me to do this before this. So that's a big component. Does that make sense? More appreciation. Remember, we talked about most people were in that neutral, some, always section. So the vast majority of people feel like they're generally appreciated. This is going to speak more to specificity. Am I appreciated? Right? And so this is one where we can always be more creative and more thoughtful about how we go about doing that so that it's customized. Right? This is where sometimes we send out an email, hey y'all, great job. That feels good-ish. You know what I mean? But I stayed late. I baked cookies. I figured out how to do whatever. Some of those things we have to see individually, call out individually for that person to answer that differently. If you would be on that. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to switch over quickly to another document, and I'm going to pass this down to you so we can get some context. Actually, I'm going to, I'll take that back. We're not, this is a different level of nerdy, so I'm going to give you these. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the changes.
Bonnie, while you're doing that,
Yes.
you know, this more on our plates kind of thing that we heard. Now, you do this across the country.
Yeah.
With all kinds of organizations. Are we the only profession that feels that way?
No.
Okay. Because I just talked to two people in town today, two different professions about different things. Both of them told me they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I would just say that we agree, I agree with this. I also agree with it as an administrator. And I think the team that's here, I can't remember a time in the 34 years that I've been in the district that there's been so much on our plates. And so we share that there's a lot going on. But I think it's also other professions as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an excuse, but that's what's happening. There's a lot on people's plates.
For sure.
To be clear, I wasn't being critical.
No.
I was just I saw that twice on there. I thought it was a question we could ask. And I guess that, yeah, we're getting more on our plates. Is there a way to take something off their plates, I guess?
For sure. And that's an iterative process, a consistent process that we're evaluating. A lot of the times what people speak to is we do a set it and forget it. Once I absorb a task, how many times does somebody come and take it from me? Rarely. Now it's just one of my tasks. And then there's another one, there's another one. What it speaks to is that there's some opportunities to reevaluate, shift things, see how things are moving. That's a taxing proposition when you already have a full plate. So that's more about creativity. That's more about finding smart ways to have some of these dialogues and do those things. And some of that is going to be challenging until other things move forward. One of the things that we say to our staff is just because we're not doing it now doesn't mean we're not doing it right. There are certain things that have to be foundationally in place to allow us to be able to do some of those other things. The other piece that I would tell you is a lot of people know when they're underwhelmed, people know when they're overwhelmed, people almost never know when they're whelmed. Right? If you've ever led anyone, how many times do people come into your office and say, you know what, boss? I think we have the appropriate amount of work. I think this is the appropriate amount of work for me. It just rarely happens. And so somebody's going to be skewed that way. Well, okay, what are the chances that an educator anywhere in the world is going to feel like they don't have enough work? That's not likely to be the case. And so if most people can't recognize their well, they're almost always just skew overwhelmed. That's not to mean that it's not true to a degree. It just means that most people don't actually have a baseline. Okay? So don't disregard the statement, it's valid, but I wouldn't also over-index on it either. I would just be more considerate about what our process is in terms of evaluating workflows and how all of those things happen. That's what I would encourage you to think about.
I need to add one more thing. As a professional educator, I found that the more years of experience I had, the more I had on my plate, because the more I basically put on my plate. It seemed like, because I was always looking for ways to increase, like with Dr. Kendall, my principal, we were always, talking about, discovering more things statistically in our testing and so forth before we had a curriculum director, and so I think that's part of it too.
For sure.
That's it.
Last thing I'll say on this is that less work is almost never a realistic answer. Let's just be honest about that. The way we generally are going to see a change in that sentiment is working better. That's generally how we see that sentiment. The elimination of inefficiencies, the elimination of miscommunications and rework. As we say, slow, smooth is fast, right? Nothing takes more time than mistakes. So when we're clear, when we have a smooth communication channel, when we have trust, those things represent time. If you ask most people in most businesses, how much time do you spend on interpersonal issues, drama, gossip, rework because of poor communication, or just general negativity? A lot or little or none. Most people say a lot. Every organization you go to, why don't you focus on culture more? We don't have time, we don't have the money. Where does the most time and money go? The people. These types of things. So we don't make time because we don't know how. We don't find time because it ain't hiding from you. Where it's at is in our inefficiencies, our miscommunications, and the lack of trust. As we build those things, some of these things will subside. The challenge in that is that those things take a little bit more time. We're dealing with humans, of course. So, all right, as we get into this, I'll show you, for those who are looking on, you won't necessarily be able to see all of this, but I want you to see this particular part. You can actually cover it up again, because I won't. We'll just go off of this right there. Okay, yeah. All right. So what I just want to show you here is, so you'll see it 2023 versus 2022. You'll see some of the changes, and I'll just quickly go through some of these changes, and then I'll give you your time for questions and things of that. All right. So as you see in the engagement score, this is a percentage increase, not necessarily percentage points, but from 72.27 to 78.17. As I said, we're trending towards that 80%. That is a pretty nice increase. The things that people like most, those things are consistent across the board, which I go back to. These are the things that people should hear a lot, because these are the things that are important to them. These are the things they want to hear. This should be all over the place all of the time. Some of the things that people want to see, if you will notice, some of the things coming off the list when we talk about connection with administration, trust, those type of things. Those things are being replaced with something more subtle, better listening, more positivity. The reason why that part is valuable is because those things are becoming more accurate, and they're less personal issues and more nuances. Once you get to a certain point, the magic is in the margins. That's why it becomes difficult. It's not the major muscle groups, it's the connective tissue that we have to really work on. Those are the hardest things to get to. Those are the hardest things to work. But we want to get out of those things of trust or care or whatever. We want to try to move away from that type of terminology into things that are more subtle and specific. I like to get feedback. I want updates. I want somebody to da-da-da. Those things are more actionable. Those things are things that we can immediately respond to and see results from. So the language is starting to change a little bit. From a day-to-day perspective, as we will talk with some of the leaders, language is a huge, huge, huge thing. How people talk about things doesn't get enough pressure. From a high level, you will have less engagement with that, but on a day-to-day, you really want to be mindful of language. Really quick through these, you'll see we went from 3 buckets to 5 buckets, so that'll be a little bit different. But what you can see in general as we talk about their daily work environment, how that is trending, okay? I feel recognized and valued, as you can see, that is on the up as well, especially moving people into that usually always. We're getting better at recognition. What we want to do is get more specific with recognition. But in terms of recognition in general, you can see that we have a marked increase in that. One of the most significant ones that we pointed out was the increase in I feel connected to others at work. That's really big. That's how you transition from having an issue with trust to I want to be listened to more or whatever. That part. Okay? So that is a big one as well. I would recommend the organization. You see we have increases on our top boxes, and that's what we're looking for. So we're trending higher and strongly agree and agree. What we're looking for is not everybody to be in the same place, but we want passion. So in those type of things, we want those top two buckets. This is where you can see where we had those questions with the peaks. This is where this kind of comes into play. On a scale of 10, where will you rank your culture? From 5.66 to 6.43. So when we're talking about near a full percentage point in this particular instance, this is significant in terms of how we think of our overall culture. This is significant. So if I just showed you one number, this would communicate the growth that has happened in the last year. People went from feeling just above average about where they were working in their culture to now we're going towards really solid, really solid. Overall level of positive, this is another one we're really excited about and proud of. Where would you rate the overall level of positive attitudes? To go from 5.37 to 6.29 is significant. People are being more positive, period. Period. And that's always a beautiful thing. Where would you rank our level of effective communication? This is rare. 5.43, 6.33. This is a significant jump. I want you to think about in all of your organizations that you all might work in. What happens if you, at a scale of 1 to 10, your organization said their communication was a 6? What would it mean for the quality of your organization and your effectiveness if that went up 1 full point? A lot. A lot. So that's a big one. Another one that we are really proud of, this is the most significant increase that I pointed out to you, is coaching. Coaching and development, our coaching effectiveness, 5.6 to 6.55. That's a big jump. And then lastly, where would you rank depth quality relationships from 6.18 to 6.79? So these particular ones, the most direct questions of showing the change, are big. So when we're talking about most of these are near 3/4 of a point or a full percentage point change. Across the board, that is significant overall. So that's a little bit in terms of the difference between what we saw last year and what it is that we're seeing this year. Questions?
How often were you surveyed? Once a year?
Yeah.
And what's the time frame for that survey? Is it like late fall?
Yeah, I mean, part of that kind of depends on when we have access to what folks was kind of happening at that time, but generally we like to try to do it late fall.
And do we have a way to quantify the respondent percentage?
Yes, I don't have that specific percentage for you right now, but we can get that for you. Yes, we do have an idea in terms of this year and next year. And actually, if my recollection is accurate, we are up in terms of participation.
Just refresh my memory, how many times did you do a presentation in front of the whole staff?
4, 5, I believe.
5?
Yeah.
And then do you work with any other organizations that have kind of a unique structure like we do, where salary is pretty much set on salary,
Yeah.
lanes, and that there's actual negotiation between, for salaries between the administration and the staff?
Absolutely. So we work with several communities. We do work with City of Sioux Falls School District, part of the Rapid City School District, their nutrition department. So we have a few different organizations that we have that have a similar structure. And that's why we can say in some of those instances, those questions skew higher
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do we have comparisons? Do you?
Comparisons
between school district to school? I mean, how do we compare against our peers?
What I would tell you is this. In terms of the people in our particular center, because we don't have every district, the entire district, the way that we have for you, it wouldn't necessarily go apples to apples. What I would tell you is that anecdotally, we can give you a general baseline, and there's things from Gallup and those type of places. I would tell you that part doesn't really matter. I mean, you would really want to focus on year over year, just because the circumstances from one district to another district, one state to another state are vast. And so there's just a lot of variables that you just can't really track it out with. I would tell you the year to year is going to be more valuable to you than what somebody else is doing. Because you're talking about political climates, and you're talking about, it's just, that's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when they're answering this on a scale of 1 to 10, do they have a slide that they can end up, I mean, is it just a 1, a 2, a 3? How do we get to the 6.43?
Yeah, so out of that 5, they're clicking that, we're taking the overall average, and then on anything is rated as being weighted. So 1s are 1, 2s are 2s, 3s are 3s.
Do you have radio buttons or do you have a way to slide your choice?
I want to say radio buttons right now, but they changed up the service that we use can change it between. Because some of that is an interface type of thing just to make it easy to use. But last time I looked, it was radio buttons.
This is probably getting a little bit too weird, but do you have a strong correlation between your questions? Like you see, there's certain aspects, if you did a Venn diagram, certain questions that correlate to each other.
Yeah.
Do you see a strong correlation between the answers then?
Yeah, so the relationship in particular, so there's several kind of, and so what you'll see here is kind of a theme when you look at it. There's certain things that are professional, personal, and kind of a potential situation. So we're asking things in that context. How do you feel about connection from a professional standpoint? How do you feel about relationship or connection from a personal standpoint? And so they will answer questions that kind of lend themselves to that throughout the survey. And then the consistency is where we know we're moving in the right direction. Because sometimes you can see an uptick, like you might have bought a pizza on the day that they did the survey. So it's really, you know what I mean? But on the whole, when we're engaging, all of those things, then we can get a more accurate read. Yeah.
So I hear you use the word big jump and substantial or
Yes.
significant, that kind of thing. And I'm guessing that's not tonight, but at some point, do you give the district some feet on the ground recommendations about what needs to be done for communication or this, or are we mainly just hearing whether we've increased or decreased?
Yeah, so when we're working with each of the leaders from the different schools, so just to give you an example from an anecdotal perspective, we're working with the leaders in schools generally with one-on-ones, things of that nature, talking through strategies and scenarios that are happening in that particular rooftop. And so that's how we're doing that particular work there. And then for this, the schools are all broken out individually. And so people can get an idea of what's happening in their own homes, and you can turn the screws on those things specifically. So right now, it's more about localized recommendations. We do have some general recommendations, but those will fall under the lines of best practices.
Any further questions from board members? We have our admin team out here. Do you guys have any questions?
Well, if I can make a statement about our admin folks here, what I will tell you, again, anecdotally from my particular expertise, engaging in the one-on-ones with some of these folks and you know, in this work, what often gets lost is the human who has to fill that seat, the challenges, the anxiety, the fear, all of those things. And especially in a world right now where there's not really safe space for leaders, where all of the energy flows up and no one really wants to really hear that you're scared or you don't know or that you don't understand. What I can tell you is working with some of these folks in the personal growth that many of them have engaged in, and the way that they have been taking the initiative to lead some of the individuals and challenge some of the individuals in their school to personally grow and to be better, which makes them better for their positions, has been pretty impressive. part of our system is some of the things that we do as a part of our process and some of the things that are voluntary. We've had a significant portion of the administrators voluntarily engage in additional work, additional learnings in order to improve themselves as leaders. That is not a normal circumstance. So I just want to give everybody that context.
Can I ask the administrators, after going through this and seeing results from last year versus this year and the stuff that you guys have taken on, do you see a difference in your buildings? Do you notice it, where we're seeing these numbers shift in the directions they're shifting? And do you see that continuing to improve over time?
Oh,
I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, so that works. I can take the head shaking, I just,
Yeah, please do.
yes.
I'll
Thank
speak
you.
from the middle school's standpoint, but some of the things that we've done, not only just in our staff meetings, but our two leaders that we had from just the middle school, they wanted to actually make a committee. And now we have a Think 3D committee at the middle school, and they are doing a lot of really fun activities. It's a lot for me, but it's great. But no, it's little things like we did a potluck where I extended their lunchtime one time, and that just was enough. I mean, food, Bonnie is correct, food helps all the time. So they're doing different things like that. There's a committee, they're doing little things after school, whether it's trivia, whether it's just some fun things, you know, maybe not think about their jobs per se or the kids or try to get boggled down, but they're, you know, the committee formed and actually had so many people that I had to tell them not so many people on the committee because they're so excited. But it's great. It's 100% change in, you know, I mean, I think we were good anyway, but now we're even better. And I think it'll just continue and the teachers have more ideas and it just continues on. And I've heard great things out of other buildings too. So yeah, it's kudos to Bonnie and his crew. And he's done a lot of work with us and I appreciate his positivity and everything. And everybody's always happy to see him. So, but again, food is the prime thing.
Thank you.
I have one.
That's anything, bro.
So this actually was last Friday. It was 4:30 at the end of the day, and I was getting ready to leave, and I saw a staff member that was vacuuming. So I went and I said, well, what are you here at 4:30 at night? You're not the janitor. What are you doing? She goes, well, I'm being a team player because the night janitor's gone, and I don't want the day janitor to have to stay late. So she goes, I told her I'd stay and vacuum all of the main hallway and be a team player, because we don't want to lose her. We really like her. We need to all work together. So that was like an aha moment, that understanding the team player part there. And then another one I would say at Stewart that I noticed was, we have Christmas ornaments hanging up, and I had sent an email out that just said, hey, if you guys want to come join. I wasn't thinking on the day I set this up. It was the last day before Thanksgiving. So it wasn't good planning on my part, but I had about 13 to 14 staff that stayed after school on their own time to decorate the halls, so the kids were excited about the school day. And when we came back to school on that Monday, the kids were excited. So different things like that we're seeing, I know, at the elementary level too. So
I had one comment I'd like to make. I was just sitting here thinking about so the board probably doesn't know this, but we have two reps from each of our buildings, and then we also have representation from food service, and then Rob comes for custodial or maintenance, and then it's all the administrators. So we have a large group that represents the entire district. And I would tell you from our first meeting last year to where we're at now, there's just a real, this is just my opinion, there's just a real strong sense of trust and very positive relationship building in those meetings. I feel like from where we started to where we're at now, there's just great conversation that takes place. And as superintendent, that's very fulfilling, not only as a leadership position, but also on a personal level. And so I just really want to acknowledge that I really appreciate where we were at and where we're at now and what we can be, because we have some work to do, we know that, but I think we've really moved the needle in a lot of areas. All of us have grown, I know I have.
Anybody else, anything to add or questions? Lonnie Herrera from Think 3D, thank you very much, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. favor say aye.
Aye.